Welcome to this week's installment of Real Clear Daf video, in which we like to take a closer look at something from the week's Daf Yomi. And this week we'd like to focus on something the Gemara says on Daf Ayin Tes. So that was Thursday's Daf. The Gemara there talks about the case of a Koy animal, this animal where one parent is a behema, is, let's say, a goat, the other parent is a chaya, is, for example, a deer. And this is an ambiguous case that the Gemara discusses, and I think it opens up an interesting discussion as to the general topic of the distinction between a behema and a chaya. So let's just back up on that general idea. Of course, we know that some animals are called behema, some are called chaya. We've seen this many times already. In our Masechta, for example, the halacha that chalev fats, the chalev that's put on the mizbeach, in the case of a carbon, are strictly forbidden for consumption, but only if you're dealing with a behema kind of animal. So, a sheep, a goat, a cow, not by a chaya, let's say a deer, or a buffalo. There's no chalev prohibition by those kinds of animals. And as well, the halacha of our parak of Asovias Beno, that one may not slaughter an animal and its offspring on the same day. Torah clearly says that's only by something like a shor or a seh, meaning by a behema, but not by a chaya. So the case of koy is where it's not clear, what we call this animal, because it is the product of a behema and a chaya. It's a hybrid of the two. So what do we call such an animal? The Gemara brings an opinion, says that Pasuk says seh, but even miktzah seh. One opinion says that even if it's only a part seh, that's included. So how would we understand that? The simple understanding would appear to be that, all right, even though it is not a pure breed behema, but since it's a part behema, it's a part said, that's good enough. That's what we would understand. It crosses the threshold, and it's okay, it's in the group called behema, it's in that club, it's in that group, and therefore the law of the matnaskun applies. You have to give the gifts to the Kohen. Much like saying that water is in the group of the liquids. It has the properties of a liquid, and therefore it's in that group. It's not in the group of the solids, it's in the group of the liquids. And that's like the decision that we're making. But then the Gemara says something which seems to completely throw this off. The Gemara says that even the Rabbanan agree that he doesn't have to give 100% of the gifts. The Gemara says that the Rabbanan are merely stating that he gives half of the matnaskun. He gives half. So how do we understand this? I don't understand this statement that he gives half. And there's another statement actually on earlier in the daf about klayim. We also suggest this kind of thing, that a mule, the Gemara suggests, is really, it's a part horse, part donkey. And so mating a mule with a mule would be klayim, which is also seemingly very hard to understand, because they're both the same thing now. What does that mean? That it still has an identity of a horse and a donkey like in there? What does that mean? The most extreme of all, we don't paskin like this opinion, but there is an opinion who says in the Tosefta that if a mule is prohibited to lead, you can't put a mule and lead, have that lead the wagon, because that would be a violation, that you can't have two species leading together. One mule. Why? Because it's both. So that would be like the most extreme version of this, that has putting this in, what does it even mean? That's the question we want to think about is, again, we have these groups. We have a group called Behem, we have a group called Chaya. Is it in the group or not? We can decide that it is in the group Behema, or maybe it's out of the group. But if it's out of the group, you don't have to give gifts. So what does that mean? That it's sort of in, he gives half. How does that make any sense? So the analogy that we'd like to work with is the classic situation of a taruvas. That we know in halacha that you can have different elements getting mixed together. Let's say you have a kosher piece of meat and then some non-kosher pieces of meat, and the non-kosher gets mixed with the kosher meat, or any kind of many dozens of all over Shas. We have all kinds of mixtures of permitted and prohibited elements. So if we could get our case of a koy to be somehow similar to that, then that would put us in possibly a place where we can understand what the Gemara is saying. And to get there, it would appear we have to, come up with a different understanding of these concepts of Behema and Chaya. That they're not exactly groups. It's not a question of are you in the Behema group or you're not. You ask somebody, is he Jewish? That person is a half Jewish, a quarter Jewish. We know there's no such thing as that. Certainly, by that kind of question, it's definitely a group thing, and you're either in that group. It's a binary. You're either that or you're not. I'd like to suggest the possibility that Behema is more an element, meaning it's a halachic substance. There's a substance in the world called Behema, and there's a substance in the world called Chaya. Now, normally that's easy to, it doesn't make a difference normally whether you call it a group or a substance. If you have an animal that's a pure Behema, if there's no ambiguity, then it doesn't make a difference. Okay, you'll say it's in the group or it's clearly a substance of a Behema, it wouldn't make a difference. However, in the case of a Koy, when you have an animal that is a product, its genes include both from Behema and Chaya, then that is a mixture of these different substances. It's like a mixture of a piece of meat in a pot. And why is it like that and not like the question of is somebody Jewish or not? So we could explain perhaps that the answer is that when we are having this halachic discussion about animals, it's a question of, is it kosher? It's a question of food. We're basically looking at the animals as food. So when we talk about groups of people, culture, groups having to do with the person's ancestry, that has to be a discussion of groups. The point is that it seems from our Gemara that when we talk about Behema and Chaya, it's not a question of a group, are you in the group or not. Rather, Behema is a substance in the world, it's an element, and therefore it's possible for that to be in a situation of a teruvas. A koy, the Gemara is telling us, is a teruvas of different things. It's a mixture of one element of behema, one element of a chaya. So literally, the practical ruling is that you pay half. You pay half because it has both. We don't have to answer that question, is it in the behema group or not in the behema group, apparently. Rather, we view this as it's like a pot of different pieces of meat in it, and that's what this koy is. It has a piece of behema meat, and it has a piece of chaya meat. There's the giranasha, that part's okay, there's the chelav, okay, there's the behema part, there's the chaya part, and that's what results in this very interesting halacha that the person pays only half, and then the extreme of that is, again, this opinion in Tosefta that a mule, having that lead the wagon would be an isser of kalayim. That again, if we look at this mule, it has both species in it. So you have two species leading it, and that's how it's viewed. We don't rule like that opinion, but this is a new perspective, at least for me, a new perspective of these concepts of Behema and Chaya, that it's not, a binary concept that we would assume, you're either in that group or not. It is elements that can be mixed. They are rather halachic substances. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.